Thank you for having me, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you all about Commonweal's latest book, Sorted, a Handbook for a Better Scotland. I'll start off just saying, what is it? This is a 10-year blueprint for an independent Scotland. It's really a distillation of a lot of what Commonweal has spent the last decade, and I'll talk more about that in a couple of slides. Everything that we've done, we've poured into this book, plus more, because we found that even amongst our vast and broad policy library, there were areas that we hadn't yet covered. This is, in many ways, the country that I want to see. This is the Scotland that I want to help to build. So why did we write it? Why this book in particular? In many ways, it's the book that a lot of people think Commonweal had written, but we haven't. So in 2018, we published How to Start a New Country. This was a 3-year blueprint that took us in a very, very specific period between the day after an independence referendum through a 3-year period of building Scotland into the kind of country that can actually run itself, a modern nation state, up to the point of Independence Day. Because right now, Dalzell, Scotland, doesn't have a lot of the government infrastructure and departments that we need to run a full country. A lot of it is still run from London on our behalf from Westminster. So How to Start a New Country just looked at those departments and how we would replicate them in Scotland or how we would build them in Scotland. We deliberately kept that book as future neutral as possible because we recognised that the point of independence, or even that period before Independence Day, was not the time to start playing party politics. We had to build a Scotland that anyone in Scotland could then engage with democratically. If we went in and said, right, well, here is our party manifesto for an independent Scotland, and by the way, we control how an independent Scotland is going to be set up. Therefore, we are making our plans. And if you disagree with them, tough. That's not democratic. It's not democratic even if you do agree with them. So we deliberately kept Commonweal's vision for an independent Scotland out of How to Start a New Country. In 2019, we published our Common Home Plan, the world's first nation-scale Green New Deal plan. And I believe still the only one. Other countries are starting to catch up in that respect, but no one's quite hit the full gamut that the Common Home Plan hit. Now, this is a 25-year strategy to create a Green New Deal and to climate-proof Scotland, to do our part to avert the climate emergency and to do our part to mitigate against it and to adapt to the damage that we've already caused. And I do say we are one of the rich countries that has disproportionately caused this climate emergency. Now, while this book contains a bit more Commonweal, it's still largely based on really the science and the engineering of climate change. There may have been choices where we said, right, we could go technology A, we could go technology B. What is the more Commonweal option? Right, that's the one we've picked. But largely, we're just following the science of climate change. And there's also more to Scotland than just climate change. So there was still a gap there. And this is what Sorted aims to fill. 2023 marks the 10th anniversary of Commonweal, and we're hoping to have a bit of a party about that later in the year, so keep an eye on the announcements for that. We've published something like 200 policy papers and other policy documents. I'll have to go back and count them all to get an exact count. We've covered all kinds of topics, and they're all based on our All of Us First ethos. So this was the time to bring all of that vast body of knowledge together and knit them into a coherent story of the kind of Scotland that we want to see from a Commonweal perspective. We're not expecting everyone to agree that that is the way that they want to see Scotland, but we want to set that ground of this is what we want. If you want something else, let's talk, let's discuss, let's do a democracy. But this is the book that everyone thought we did, and we now have. Now, what's in it? If I go through all 19 chapters, I'll be here till next week. I could honestly give you an hour's lecture on each one of them. So I'm only going to give you the briefest of tasters, but it covers everything from civics to democracy to tax to industrial strategy to energy policy through care and health and defence and security and international affairs. It really is a broad as prospectus for an independent country as we could imagine. It's also chock full of the most gorgeous artwork. A couple of the bits of art in this book genuinely brought me to tears when I saw them for the first time. I'm going to show you a couple of tasters of them as well. But if you've already got a copy of the book, you probably know which ones I'm talking about. So the chapter on democracy. If we become independent and the only thing we do is take all of the powers that sit at Westminster and move them to Holyrood, that's not going to put Scotland on the best footing. That would actually make Scotland the most centralised country in Europe. Probably dictatorships out there that are more decentralised than that would make Scotland, because we lack a lot of the democratic structures that are considered normal in a lot of Europe. So we need to build them up at the same time. We need municipal scale democracy. We need a written constitution to check abuses against power, to protect our democracy against those who would corrupt it for their own aims. Throughout all of it, we want citizens' assemblies to oversee and guide and regulate politicians. And we really mean that from at all levels. Our local democracy paper, Development Councils, sees all of our municipal councils guided and controlled by citizens' assemblies. But we also have a plan to, instead of having a House of Lords, the way the UK does, overseeing the legislative chamber, we want a House of Citizens. We want a citizens' assembly overseeing what is currently the Holyrood Parliament. In our chapter on money, we are straight up, Scotland needs its own currency as soon as possible. Without that, you just simply lack a lot of the tools that you need to build the country in the early days. We talk about how Scotland's budgets, rather than be set on a strict year-to-year basis, which encourages a lot of short-term thinking, we should start thinking long-term and have at least part of the national budget looking in 5 and 10 year cycles. Government's starting to edge towards that kind of thinking. But it's still early days for that. The big thing that we are really pushing, and if there's anyone in the audience who knows about modern monetary theories or related sections of economics, we really recognise that the job of government isn't to balance the national budget, balance the government budget, but to balance the money system across the whole. A government that balances its own books and does so by breaking your back with austerity is failing its duty towards you. So we are trying to build a Scotland that works on that holistic view rather than just narrowly focusing on one area of one budget. And that relates to the chapter on tax. We have to accept that when the moment we become independent, we are going to inherit a lot of the UK's dysfunctions. The UK economy is debt-based. It's based on a speculative economy, especially on things like land and housing, which are severely overvalued. These things need to be deleveraged so that we don't cause chaos as prices fall. We also need a sane tax code. A lot of the UK's tax code has been written just to fill it full of loopholes, and a lot of those loopholes have been written by those who want to jump through them and adjust their tax affairs for maximum efficiency for themselves, which usually means how can we more easily get our money to a tax haven. Sometimes that tax haven's overseas, sometimes it's not. We are going to be talking about new taxes that Scotland could bring in. Some of these we could bring in now, but certainly in an independent Scotland, one of the big ones that we are talking about is an externality tax. This is a tax on the harm that products create when they come in, when they're produced. So it incorporates things like carbon taxes. It incorporates a tax on the use of plastic in its design, or the use of mining or other unsustainable practices. Might even include things like unsustainable working conditions in its use, especially if you're importing those goods. And the idea being, you essentially price out the bad goods that are causing harm to the economy and make it easier to make the good goods cheaper. Taking that idea, going into the economy chapter, we need to deconsumerize. Consumer capitalism is entirely based on a model of buy a shiny thing, throw it in the bin, buy a shinier thing tomorrow, throw that in the bin, do it again, do it again. We experiment for you. The next time you are watching, especially broadcast television, and it gets to the ad break, Do people still watch broadcast television with ad breaks anymore? They're all streamed online. Look at the adverts that are getting put at you. How many of them are actually trying to sell you the happiness that comes with buying a new shiny thing? And how many of them are, when you actually look at the advert, trying to sell you the misery of not buying one? Your life is incomplete unless you buy this shiny thing and then throw it in the bin and buy our next shiny thing next year. This is unsustainable. We want to move to a model where we are borrowing more, leasing more, and I've seen some really good stuff about expansions of tool libraries in Glasgow today. So really well done to the folk who are doing that. We need more of them. Every community needs a tool library. We want to repair more. Our economic and industrial strategies, well, first we need one. We can't just be releasing a new headline about hiring a new business advisor and then waiting 6 months until we realize that they haven't done anything and hiring another one. We need an actual long-term economic and industrial strategy coming from the government, because the government is not some invisible hand bystander in that is hindering the economy, and it's always best if they get out the way, which is the free market libertarian conservative view of things. The government is an active player in the economy. It employs people in the public sector, employs people in the private sector sometimes as well, and it does things like national procurement, which shape the market and the economy around you. So part of that economic and industrial strategy is about how the government uses national procurement to buy smart, to buy local, and to fill gaps that the so-called free market isn't filling. This could even include things like a national job guarantee scheme. What it can't be doing is what it often does right now, is just buy the cheapest things possible, or sometimes not even the cheapest, because it gets embroiled in very expensive PFI schemes. This was a phrase that came at us as we were developing things. You are not your GDP growth. You are not just some actor whose sole role in an economy is to make that economy bigger. An economy has to serve you, it has to serve people. And part of that is the place that you fill in not just the economy, but in society and in your community. So a lot of that has been eroded. We need to start rebuilding that sense of community around us. How many of us live in an area where really the main role is what's known as a dormitory village, where the folk around you, all they're doing is commuting somewhere else to do their job or do their social life. That might have eroded somewhat since the pandemic, although maybe it's coming back. We need to build that sense of community, that sense of local value, and that sense of place. So in this chapter, we're talking about things like community hubs. We're talking things about a town centre first approach to your local area, which embeds small local businesses in your community that you can engage with, rather than driving out of town to the big department store that is almost certainly shipping its profits overseas. A lot of us are talking about the health crisis and the care crisis at the moment, and it is a crisis. There's a lot to do right now about that. But in this book, we are looking at the long term of that as well. If you've been following Commonweal for a while, you know that we have produced a blueprint for a national care service that should make us as proud to support as the National Health Service does. And a lot of that work from that blueprint has made it into Sorted as well. Our biggest principle here is care must be publicly owned, must be not-for-profit, and must be free at the point of use. Exactly the same conditions that we demand from the health service as well. We want it to be controlled locally, not completely and utterly controlled potentially by the care minister, which is the current case for the Scottish National Care Bill. And we want it really to be delivered almost at the same level as you would expect your GP. We want a community hub in your community where if you feel you need care, and everybody needs care, or you feel you need help to care for someone else, then you can walk in and they can be the point of entry that then gets you the service that you need. We're also clear that the staff working for the care service must be cared for as well. So we have strong demands for things like national collective bargaining to maintain wages and conditions. One of the big things that an independent Scotland will have to face in a way that it devolves Scotland really does not is our position in security and on defence. We're clear, the Commonweal view is Scotland should be a force for peace in the world. And when we're looking at the threats to Scotland, of which there are some, they do have to be handled appropriately and with a rational risk assessment. Scotland is not the kind of country that will need a blue water navy capable of unilaterally invading another country. We are advocating a non-aligned stance, which means not joining NATO. Now, this is not the same as being isolationist, but it does mean that Scotland can approach even the global threats that are happening, such as those that are happening in the world right now. And we can approach them again rationally and in the best interests of the world in that sense of a force for peace, rather than being dragged into someone else's war. Scotland, we think, should sign the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, and we should start actively contributing to ending global nuclear threats, including the ones that are currently based within our borders. I've been a wee bit disturbed by some of the voices in Scottish government circles and some of the parties around here that are starting to kind of water down commitments to signing TPNW, starting to say that, well, if Scotland joins NATO, then we can take a Norwegian approach or a Swedish approach to nuclear weapons, where we will not have them permanently based in Scotland, and we will make sure Trident leaves Scotland, but we might just have them visit from time to time. If we sign TPNW, that would not be possible. And finally, Scotland needs to look towards its reputation in the world. International reputation is important, and as we've seen with global Britain, very easy to lose. The Brexit debacle has really opened the world's eyes to what Britain is. Britain got a big pass in the world, especially in Europe, but elsewhere as well, where its mastery of diplomacy was taken as a given. And Britain was given a pass on many things because of that. People's eyes are opened. They're now sort of looking at Britain in a different way, starting to actually listen to what Britain's saying and looking at what Britain's doing. And that reputation has been eroded. A newly independent Scotland will take time to master the intricacies of international diplomacy. We will make mistakes, but it is worth the time and investment. You only have to look at the contribution that other small and medium-sized countries around the world have been making, including on things like TPNW, where now half of the world's countries have signed up to it. Large parts of Africa, large parts of South America, large parts of the Pacific are all signed up to this international treaty, and that membership is growing by the day. By dint of our geography, Scotland is going to be standing between the spheres of influence of the EU and global Britain. It's clear now that we cannot be part of both. Scotland, if it remains part of the UK, will not be re-entering the EU. None of the major UK parties are advocating rejoining the EU, not even formerly pro-EU parties like Labour or the Lib Dems. So independent Scotland is going to have to make that choice. Do we lean towards Britain and its economy, or do we lean towards the EU? Leaning towards one will mean leaning necessarily away from the other. There's no real best of both worlds anymore here. So we're going to have to start thinking about how we arrange our borders and how we arrange our immigration policy. These are going to have to be rational, and are going to be as low friction as possible. It's a very complex area, so I'm not going to go into too much more detail on that, other than to say this does not mean free ports. If you've been watching the news over the past week or so, Scotland's now going to be host to 2 new green free ports, one of which is in Cromarty, one of which is in Forth. These free ports are not just a couple of warehouses down by the harbour side. They cover zones up to 45 kilometres away from that harbour, which means that places as far away from Edinburgh as Biggar and Carluke and Motherwell are now within the fourth free port zone. And any company in these zones who wants a tax break can sign up to its conditions. That's no way to run an economy, no way to run international trade. Free ports don't work, they never have. So, on that, Why should you read Sorted? Currently, we think it's the only comprehensive foundational plan for an independent Scotland, and we're hoping that even those who don't agree with it can use it as a launch pad to produce their own. When we were having team meetings about the book and what we wanted to say to people, one of the things I asked for was that when I opened the first page of this book, I'd get a sense of hope for the future. And by the time I finished it and closed the last page, I'd have a sense of determination to bring that hope to life. And you might think I'm biased, and I am, but genuinely that's the sense I got from it when I read the book for the first time. And if you follow me in that, and you have that hope and you gain that determination, if you want to help make that Scotland happen, join us, join our campaign, and help us get there. So thank you. As always, Commonweal as an organisation, we're entirely funded by our donors and supporters. We don't get government money. We don't have large corporate grants. We're utterly reliant on folk like yourself. So if you are not a donor, then please sign up and help us produce our policy papers, produce more of these books, and produce the campaign to support them. If you are already a donor, and I know times are tough, but if you're able to increase that donation, that's also just as valuable. Or if you can convince a friend to sign up as well, that's even better. Go onto our website, download all of our policy papers, have a browse in our shop, see if there's anything else there that takes your fancy. And if you'd like to join our campaign centre, there's links there too.